Okay, so this is one evening after I took down a 100-pound doe, my first deer. And I thought I would record the story, one, for my family in Arkansas, and two, for posterity, so that I would just remember the details when I got older. And three, for Lydia, who's riding with me, who hasn't heard the full story yet. So we're driving, but this is not probably the best video and audio, but it will suffice for a hunting story. So Jonathan and I dropped Fred off, who was going to try to ambush bow hunt a deer stand, and we went to a different deer stand. We got there. We probably got there at 6 or so. That gave us about 30 minutes before sunup, 40 minutes before sunup. And so we're sitting there, we get settled in. One of the things was Jonathan, we had what we call palmetto bugs here in South Carolina, but basically the large American or red-brown cockroaches were all in the stand, and one crawled over Jonathan, and he was getting the heebie-jeebies, and we were killing them the whole morning. So that morning, we didn't see anything. Part of that, we did see two turkeys, and I'll get to that part. But part of the not seeing anything could have been my fault. I had silenced my phone, put the little ringer thing off. I had turned my normal sleep-based wake-up alarm off, and I had turned down the volume on my phone. And so, to my mind, nothing could break through on my phone. Yet at 7:05, there was a daily alarm that somehow I missed was still turned on, that went off out in the deer woods. And Jonathan and I scrambled to turn it off, and I was just so beside myself. Jonathan was telling me not to worry about it because deer move, and if they were a mile off or so, they wouldn't hear it. Could have spooked off any that were nearby at the time, but it wouldn't mean that our morning was worthless. Or just go around me, motorcycle, if you want to go around me. I'm already going 10 miles more than the speed limit. Has nothing to do with the story. So we're sitting there. I said we didn't see anything. Probably around 8:30. I was sitting on the left-hand side. Jonathan was sitting on the right-hand side of this box stand. It had 5 windows, 2 larger ones in the front, 2 smaller ones on each side, and 1 smaller one in the back, just in case window. But we didn't use that one any. And so I was on the left, and my vision to the forest food plot was a little bit blocked by some trees that lined up. So I could just barely see the cutaway to the farthest wood plot. And maybe around 8:30 or so, we both saw a buck. Couldn't tell how big it was, and you'll know why, because it came out into the lane, but as soon as it came out into the lane, it jumped and then did this turnaround thing and went back into the woods. And we're like, what was that? Did he smell our scent? But the wind wasn't very strong, and it was kind of just hovering, which wasn't great for odor. So it was kind of turning back and forth. It was sometimes in our face, sometimes from our side, but most of we're like, he probably didn't smell anything. And maybe 20 minutes later, 20 minutes later, we heard a lot of coyotes a little bit beyond where that was. Maybe it sounded like they were about a mile and a half away. And Jonathan said he'd never heard like a pack of coyotes here in South Carolina. He'd heard that in Alabama, but not in South Carolina. So we're thinking after that, maybe he smelled the scent of the coyotes when he got out near that food plot and turned around and he got back. So around 9:05, when I got up in the morning, I used the restroom. I urinated. Before we ever got in our deer stand, where we let Fred off, I urinated, but somehow my body still wanted to produce more urine, and I'm sitting there and I'm holding it, and around 9:05, which was about the time Jonathan said they sometimes stop hunting anyways, I told Jonathan I had about 5 or 10 minutes left and I was going to have to do something. And so we didn't have a pee bottle or anything, and so we waited. We were texting Fred, who was hunting a different spot behind us. So we all kind of agreed, yeah, we'll get out. He hadn't seen anything. We hadn't seen anything other than that one buck. We've been out there for 2.5, 3 hours. We would maybe go in. So we kind of pack up. We climb down. We walk back to the truck, which was probably, 300, 400, 500 yards away, do my business. And by that time, we get a text from Fred saying he did see a buck, and he would want to wait a little bit longer and see if he came in. So we was like, okay, we'll just go back to the stand. We got out quietly. We'll get back in quietly. I mean, sure, our scent was swirling around, but we'll see. So we got back up in the stand, and as I'm going up the ladder in the clearing where we were over kind of looking, it was I haven't described where we were hunting, but we're hunting. It's kind of the clearing right in front of us, and then 4 lanes out around us that had food at the end of those lanes, food or a little food plot. And so there were 2 turkeys in there, and I think they saw us a little bit, but they didn't seem spooked. They just walked off. So he's excited about that for turkey season. We got back up in the stand, didn't see anything. Fred didn't see anything, so we went home. Because that was my first time hunting as an adult. I hunted once with Dad a long time ago. Jonathan wanted to be with me the first time just to make sure, talk me through some stuff while we're sitting there, but he felt confident, in my abilities to let me hunt there that evening by myself. So we went in. I had to get some stuff to hunt by myself because I didn't have binoculars, so I got some binoculars. I got a thermocell. I thought I would just be able to use earplugs, but I didn't like being deaf when I had them in, but I also didn't want, I'm already a little bit deaf anyway, so I didn't want to shoot without some type of hearing protection. So I had some of the electronic ones in the past just for, recreational shooting. So I got some of those again. And so that evening we came back around 5. They dropped me off. It was kind of cool, the first time walking to a deer stand by myself. And getting up by myself and setting up by myself, getting my thermocell out, had, my binoculars, checking the different food plots, seeing if I could see any movement beyond the food plots. And, well, the good thing about having so many lanes and so much area to watch is you don't get bored because, you're trying to stealthily look at the left, stealthily look at the right, look down here, am I missing anything up close? And then you kind of repeat that. So it's almost like a 3 or 4 minute routine that you get in. It kind of gets monotonous, and I'm wondering, am I moving too much? But I really was trying to just be, still as possible, but still at the same time checking all the food lanes, the lanes and the food plots. It was probably, I could go back and check the exact time. 6:15, 6:10 in the evening. I'd been on stand for 45, 50 minutes and seen nothing in the evening. And I thought, you know what, we got about 30, 40 more minutes of light. It's all right, Michael. You're probably not going to see anything. It's your first day hunting. Some people go days and days and weeks without hunting. So I kind of resigned myself. I may not, it's okay. Just relax. You don't have to, check all the food plots. Just, sit here, enjoy nature. I was using my binoculars to see if I could see any snakes at the bottom of any trees, or we had squirrels on the food plots pretty commonly, so I would check them out, see if they were getting angry or whatever. And so I was kind of resigning, if it doesn't happen, it's probably not going to happen. That's fine. And literally 10 seconds after that thought, I look over, and then the extreme right hand plot, 4 doe, 2 and then 2 more come out, and they start eating the corn there. And Jonathan and I had been talking earlier that day about doe's tendencies to be really watchful at first. He said bucks maybe not if they're in rut. Sometimes they come out and they're really stupid, but does are more tentative generally, and that if they're looking kind of my way, if they put their head down, they may look again. And that's exactly what they did. They were up and down, up and down. It probably took me 2 minutes. It felt like forever, but a minute, 2 minutes just to get my binoculars up, because I had them. They would put their head down. I'd start to lift them up. They'd put their head back up. And I'm moving as quiet as possible. Head down, pick a little up. So, finally I get them, and I'm looking over to my right, and I'm just still watching them. And I'm thinking maybe there's a buck behind the 4 of them. And if I wait here long enough, maybe the buck will come out. But I waited for 3 minutes and no buck came. And so I thought, maybe I take the shot at a doe. So I slowly get my binoculars back down. I text Jonathan hey, there's 4 doe here. You want me to take the shot? And he said, yeah, if you can get a clean shot, take the shot. So by this time they've settled down some, because they've been on the food for 3 or 4, maybe 5 minutes. And so it didn't take me as long to get the gun up. And I'm sitting here thinking, my next thought was, how in the world am I going to take this shot at the extreme right? Because, I'm not a small guy. So there's not a whole lot of room inside this box stand. And I was like, if I move around enough and angle my body around enough that I can take this shot right-handed, those doe are gone. And so after, maybe trying for 30 seconds to a minute, and I was trying to just roll my chair over a little bit, it was not rolling over. And I was like, if I push harder on this chair, I'm gonna hit something. I'm gonna make a sound. Those deer are gonna be gone. If I take the shot, I'm just gonna have to take it left-handed. So I get scope up on the deer, and I'm like, first of all, the scope was kind of better than the binoculars in the sense that I felt like it was didn't move as much. And I was more hidden because I was down. So when the scope came out was the time I started really checking them out, making sure none of them had any spots. They were all 4 doe, no little bitty button bucks or anything like that. And I was trying to also pick out, if I did take one down, which one would I want to take down. And so there are 2 that were larger than the other 2. So I'm guessing I had 2 2-year-olds and 1 1-year-old does. I don't know. But I was like, one of these 2 will be good. I was like, yeah, I think that one's the biggest one. I'll take her. And so I waited and waited and waited for her to present herself in a way that I could shoot her and not be surrounded by the other 3 running around her. And so finally, that happened, and I'm sure this happens every time, but for your first time and maybe your second and third and fourth, I got, I guess, what we would call not buck fevers, but doe fever, since that's what I was shooting, and your heart's boom, 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 boom. And I had those electronic earplugs in, and it just sounded like drums in my ears, and I was expecting it, but I thought I had expected it enough that I would be able to calm it down. And I was trying to breathe, settle myself down. My scope was going all over. Couldn't hold anything still. And by the time that before I ever calmed back down, she had moved, and that shot was gone. And I was like, well, you may have just missed your opportunity, because they're still a little skittish. She's kind of jumping off the trail and back into the woods and then back in, and the two younger ones were just eating, and the two bigger ones were kind of in and out. And so she comes back in, and I kind of re-sight her, and I'm like, hey, here we go. I'm just waiting for her to clear again. And so she did clear. I was aiming in between the shoulders, in that sweet spot. I think I pulled my shot a little bit, because I was aiming closer to right between her two shoulders, but I shot a little further down in the lungs and heart. So still, still a good shot, but not exactly where I was aiming. So I was like, I can't sit and wait and think about this. I need to, so I just I got the scope on the spot, muscle froze, stopped breathing, pulled the trigger, and of course, boom. And I haven't been, actually, that was the very first time I shot that gun. That was Jonathan Compton's gun, because I didn't have a rifle that was sighted in yet that I was wanting to use. So the very first time I shot that gun, and the only time I shot that gun, I killed a doe with it. But if you haven't been shooting a lot, I don't know about you, I cannot keep my eyes open the first 2 or 3 times I pull the trigger. It's just, that's, whatever. So my eyes, you close for the boom, and, open them back up, and they're just scattering. And I'm like, I hope I hit something. And so I text Jonathan, and I was like, and they were close enough that they heard the shot. And Fred said he knew that I had waited. It was long enough between me texting him and Jonathan to when I pulled the trigger that he's like, he knew that I had waited for a good shot. So, but I was like, all right, I'm going to wait 5 minutes and then go down and see if I see any blood. And they're like, well, did you see any crashing, or did they just run away quietly? And I'm like, Jonathan, I don't know. I pulled the trigger and they were gone. Like, I'm not tuned in for those types of details. He's like, okay, we'll go. He's like, well, don't disturb the blood trail. Wait for us. Or, okay, you can't. I was like, well, I'm already out of the stand now. And I was like, well, I'll go see if I see any blood. So I go down, walking quietly down the lane and to the food plot. And I'm looking, I'm like, there's some blood. It's not a huge amount of blood, which, my first concern was, did I miss it altogether? And then once I saw the blood, I was like, okay, well, I hope I hit it hard enough that I didn't just wound it, and she's going to die a slow, painful death, or die a death, by getting chased by those coyotes we heard. So all those things were going through my mind. So there's a deer right here at our school. 2 deer. We're going to work out. So I saw the first little bit of blood, and I saw more blood, and then I saw a huge amount of blood, and it all kind of went off to the left. And I thought, oh, she must have gone to the left. So I'm kind of looking, and Jonathan's like, don't disturb the blood. We need to be able to read it. I'll be there with you. So I come back to the very beginning of the blood, and I just sitting there thinking, at this time I'm thinking Jonathan's going to be on his way any minute. Oh, how naive I was. But I looked down and I was like, oh, whatever that little bitty piece of rubber or tire rubber is, or whatever is buried in the dirt over there, that kind of looks like rattles. And then my eyes kind of refocused. I was like, oh my goodness, there's a huge timber rattlesnake, probably 4 foot. I was probably 6 to 8 foot away from it when I saw it, and I was probably at the where the big blood was. Maybe 4 foot away from the timber rattlesnake. So she was definitely watching me, was eyeing me. But I like snakes, so I didn't do anything to it. I was just sitting there watching it. I took some pictures and showed it to Jonathan, and he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just chilling with the snake. So Jonathan's and cell phone reception was in and out. So I'd sent some pictures to Jonathan of the blood and the snake, and I think that delayed. So there was some miscommunication because he was asking me some questions that I'd answered, but I don't know that he got the text. So he was asking me again, did you see blood? He went off that other text thread. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, was it bright or was it dark? And I was like, it's bright. He's like, well, that's good because that probably means it's lung or heart. He's like, how much? And I'm like, I don't know how much is a lot. I've never seen, like, I see blood, but I don't know if it's a lot of blood or not. And he's like, all right, well, we'll be there in a little bit. We still have 15 or 20 minutes of hunting time, and we want to finish hunting on our stands. And I'm like, okay, but my deer's out there. So I'm sitting there waiting, just me and Miss Timber Rattler sitting there waiting. It's getting darker and getting darker. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to wait. And I said something, we heard the coyotes again. And I was like, I hear the coyotes. And the blood trail had let off in that direction. I was like, and I'm thinking, those coyotes better not be getting that deer. Because they're like, and Jonathan's like, it's going to be dark when we track her, so just kind of preparing me, because I guess he could tell by my text that I was ready to go. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back to the tree stand and wait. So I go back to the tree stand. My thermocell is about burned out at this point, so mosquitoes are starting to get to me. I was like, I'm just going to go back where I had just been pumping out a bunch of thermocell and get away from the mosquitoes and wait this out. So Jonathan, do you have your phone with you? Okay, Mom, we're driving around the school to tell the story so I can finish it. I didn't know it was gonna be this long, and my 360 keeps showing up, and Mom's like, "Are y'all okay?" Because I'm going into the school and not and out of the school. So I'll try to wrap it up. So Jonathan and Fred finally show up. And when I go show them the blood, and that larger blood that looked like it was going off to the left where the coyotes were, I had realized it too. I was thinking about it in the deer stand, because that was in the direct line of my shot. So that must have been the blowout of blood just from the shot. And then the blood that I saw on the ground was obviously from the wound. So Jonathan was, basically teaching me how to follow a blood trail, and we saw some, we saw the next one, so we'd go to the next one, and he's like down 3 foot on the ground, looking for the next one, and he was concerned at first that I may not have shot her good enough to drop her or to bleed out in any time frame that we'd be able to find her. But we just started seeing more and more blood, and we would see splatters, and it would be kind of there. Sometimes it was confusing because we would see blood like in more than one spot, more than one direction. We got like, okay, this one's the dead end, so like we think she's like maybe jumping back and forth. We probably went 50 yards into the woods. Maybe 60 yards into the woods, and we finally saw this little sapling that was just covered in blood. And Fred had said, that's a good sign. That means she's probably starting to lose consciousness and like leaning up against the sapling. Maybe it was just because of the pain of the wound that she was like trying to lean up against something. And but that was, again, like not the actual path. Like the sapling was like this, and the path to where she was actually over to the left a little bit. And so tracking, and Jonathan's like, wait, tracking, and he's like, we're just going from spot to spot. Maybe, I don't know, somewhere, it's hard to know for sure. I had guessed around 75 yards. Jonathan had guessed around 60 yards. Fred had guessed 60 to 75. So we're all agreed that that's about how far she was out. So about 10 yards out from her, Jonathan turns around and he says, Michael, I want to be the first one to congratulate you on your first kill. Like, follow the blood in that direction, because he was kind of up in front. So I'm sitting here following it, and there she was. She was covered in bugs, which I don't know, like, that it makes sense, but I wasn't expecting it. Like 3 or 4 horseflies we killed off of her. Her eye had been covered with fire ants, which I was like, okay. But so we took some pictures there, tagged her, drug her out. We didn't drug her out along her line, so we were trying to find the straightest path back to the vehicle where we had parked. And the rest is history. We took her over to Jonathan's, got some more pictures. I got blood on my face. Got her in the back of the truck, took her to the processing place, got more blood on my face, because Cordray was like, Jonathan's like, this is his first deer, and he's like, he's kind of big for this to be his first deer. And I'm like, well, I've kind of been an indoorsy, techie kind of guy, but I wanted to learn to hunt as well. And he was like, well, he needs blood on his face. And I was like, I already got blood on my face. He's like, you didn't get it on your face here. So they had like this water bottle full of like dark blood. And like the blood from my deer, like it smelled like fresh, clean, like it was blood, but it didn't smell nasty. This blood was like, and so I got some more pictures with that, and that was it. We sent her off for processing. Gonna get some back straps, gonna get some cube steak, gonna get some venison jerky, and some venison hamburgers. So that's the story. Any questions? All right. So hopefully you enjoyed this 30-minute. I had no idea this was 30 minutes. Probably 5 or 6 minutes is what I was thinking. Rendition of my first doe.